All right, guys, I think we'll get started. Grab some food, grab a seat. Welcome to the Hive, everybody. I'm Nick Boulanger, your host. Just our next event, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up, will be March 28th, and it will be in at Lucid with Jerem Chung. So that'll be about scientific method for product development. So that'll be March 28th. Just some housekeeping items. Yeah, food's over here, bathrooms are out there. I'm also wanting to share some open positions at Encino with you. We have I'm saying we, I don't work here. We have a head of product job and also a UX designer job. Is that right, Ben? Or was it?
Yeah, principal product designer for design systems and a head of product role.
Awesome. Just want to give a great thank you to Encino and Ben Tech for hosting the event, and then also to Sembrar and Brandon Gardner for providing the food. You know, they get nothing out of this. It's all from the goodness of their hearts, so let's give them a round of applause. And Brandon, say a few words.
Not out of the goodness of my heart. I get to get up here and talk to you for a little bit. No, no, I love Product Hive. I've obviously been in the community for a long time. Good to be here. All right, here's a question. Pizza or sandwiches? Okay, so raise your hand, pizza. All right, one hand. Oh. Okay, sandwiches. So I chose right. All right, you chose right. I chose right. Okay, because it was like, all right, I try to go. I'm first on sandwich. I'd rather do the sandwich. It's less. All right, so good. Chose well there. So I'm Brandon Gardner, founder, CEO of Sembrar. Where's the clicker?
There's no clickers. You have to press next. Yeah.
All right. All right. If your product team is stretched thin, too many side projects. Oh. Budget constrained, not enough resources, falling behind. Does any of these name you at all? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Okay. If this is any of you, that's why Sembrar exists. It's a very, I wouldn't say a brand new concept, but a year and a half ago, jumped out onto my own and started as a fractional product manager and realized that there were other people that wanted to do this fractional product management, and also realized there was a lot more demand out there than I could just cover myself. So started Sembrar. We provide, in all those cases, it's probably going to cause churn. 66% of all senior PMs are looking for another job, and you need a little extra capacity. And if you're not a groupie of Marty Kagan, Daniel, is that you? Oh, disciple, groupie of Marty Kagan. Okay.
Disciple.
If you believe that a product manager can get their job done and do a great job, less than that, give me a call. Spend 15 minutes with me. I'd love to tell you more about how fractional product management can help you. We have incredible product managers. One great one that I'm not going to mention that's also in the room with me, maybe later on. But we have great, actually, from this community that work as fractional product managers. Go and find your fractional product manager. If you want to connect with me, here you can connect with me. I'd love to tell you more about what we do. And Daniel, you're the main show.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so my name is Daniel, as I've been introduced. I'm a huge fan of Marty Kagan. So I'm really not. I really dislike actually Marty Kagan. That's the whole joke. But I actually had a slide about him, but I removed it. I was like, I don't want to trash talk. He's a good guy. But I'm happy to talk about why I have some issues about some of the kind of thought leaders in the product industry kind of at the end here. But I'm here to talk about a little bit of principles of gamification. And I thought that potentially a good way to do this is to tell you a little bit of the story of Duolingo from kind of my eyes of how I saw things in the 5 years that I was there. And then by so doing, you're going to catch some principles of gamification in the presentation, and hopefully it applies to you. I'm actually pretty excited about this because I think Utah is really good at B2B software, but I think we lack a lot of the B2C type of expertise. So I'm hoping to this kind of helps a little bit on your initiatives there. And the last thing I'll say before I get started is I know this is going to be tough for people who are online, but you are welcome to participate in the comments, but I would love to have a conversation more than a presentation. So I do have some stories to share, but I would love for you to stop me and say, hey, tell me a little bit more about this, or how did you get this, whatever it might be, anything that's on your mind. Let's just not wait for the last 15 minutes. I know it's going to be a little bit tough. Maybe we can pass the mic around how we're going to do this, or I can repeat the question, but I think it will help me know where to take this conversation. Is that fair? Okay. So Duolingo, for those of you who are not familiar with Duolingo, Duolingo is a language learning app, right? So I kind of pulled this screenshots. Which time do we have till 5:30? Is that right? 5 o'clock. All right. So I pulled some screenshots about how Duolingo looks like right now, roughly, right? So who here has heard of Duolingo or not? Does anyone not know what Duolingo is, or is that familiar? All right. So real brief is a language learning app, right? So it's mostly free. They make money of freemium and ads, so you can pay a subscription for some little kind of additions there. But the core, the free experience the learning experience is free. So in the first screen, you see this kind of path that we call the tree, the language learning tree, and is the curriculum. Once you press a button, you get this little lessons, and then if you get it right, you get this green thing. Excited, congratulations. Now you get an error, and then there's all this kind of steps. So this looks like really pretty, really well designed, and the designers are phenomenal at Duolingo. But behind this, there's a ton going on that seems pretty obvious to people, but it's incredibly complex in everything that's going on a screen and the game mechanics that we have to keep people motivated. And these are some examples that we have here. And this is by no means the full list. But everything that you see in Duolingo, literally everything is gamified. There's not a single team in Duolingo that is not thinking gamification when they're working on the app. And they have about 700 or so people working in the language learning app. So that's that. And the reason why Duolingo works really hard on gamification is because one of the biggest core beliefs is that when it comes to language learning, the hardest thing is not grammar, is not pronunciation. The hardest thing when it comes to language learning is staying motivated to continue to learn the language, right? It's like any good habit. One of the hardest things is staying motivated to see it through. So the question is, how do we help people stay motivated for language learning, which actually is really good for the business, right? So this is the latest quarterly earnings, so you can get a sense of how big Duolingo is. I believe market cap right now is close to $8 billion, and they have 25 million DAUs. Anyways, they're doing great, is what I'm trying to say here. So every time I see this slide and people talk about how great Duolingo is and all that stuff, I think about this, and I'm the guy in the corner, and I think to myself, they don't know that it wasn't always like this. So let me tell you the story. So I was working at Dropbox in San Francisco, and I took this job to work at Duolingo. So I moved to Pittsburgh. And one of the first things that I did is I looked at the data. And so I looked at the data, and I found out that DAUs were down. It's like the first time in the history of Duolingo, the month that I joined, DAUs were lower than they were last year. And it never happened before, and it never happened again. But the month I joined, they were down. And I was so freaking frustrated, right? Because I just moved my family to Pittsburgh. And I was like, this is so messed up. So I was like, how can I let this happen? That's one of the problems. If someone can solve this, sometimes you join companies, they know everything about you, you know nothing about the company. And I was like, I'm never going to let this happen again, right? But anyways, I was like, how can we let this happen? Such a great company at the time, I thought. And then DAUs were actually in decline. So this is a little bit about how Duolingo structures the teams. And this is a simplification. But each of these kind of boxes is a product team. So you have co-leads, which is typically a PM, an engineering lead. And then you have the typical designer, a bunch of engineers kind of in the team. And we structured it based on areas. So an area is a group of teams that are focusing on a specific kind of objective, right? So the green ones were basically the learning areas, right? One is more focused on curriculum. The one's focused on how do you teach better and making changes to the product. You have a monetization area, thinking about how do we make money, right? Engagement. So the ones that are in dotted line is the ones that I was over. So as a senior director of product there, and there was like, I don't know, 15 like product teams, like 140 people seeking to increase the efficacy of Duolingo and the engagement side of things. How do we keep people motivated to do that through gamification, right? So we own DAUs, all this retention numbers and all this fun stuff, right? So I looked a little bit about what was the history there, and I found the following. Number one is that over the past few years, we had been working on a lot of experimentations that seem to be good kind of motivation and gamification. In this case, is grabbing like a learning from a different app and pull it into Duolingo. And it was packed with experiments like this. This one in particular took 3 months to build and had no impact at all on metrics. It didn't hurt. It didn't help. It's just like no impact at all. And 3 months to build. So that's what was going on in the engagement side of things. In the learning side of things, things were much, much worse. They had spent 3 years, and no kidding, they shipped one meaningful feature during those 3 years. And a bunch of bug fixes, mostly making sure things don't go down and, like kind of cleaning up some stuff. But one good feature in 3 years, and they were 100% stuck and lost. And I'll tell you a little bit about why. So every time I hate process. Like, I'm not your usual, VP of product that's like, here's the process, and we do the sprint weekly, and I'm not that guy. But I do have this one process for how do you deliver impact. And it's really easy. Number one is you find truth. That's it. I'm not saying find insights, but be obsessed with finding truth. So just to give me a sense, I'm guessing most of you are PMs, but is anyone here not a product manager? And tell me a little bit, wow, most of you. Okay, so what do you do? Design? Anyone not design or PM? What do you do? Developer and? Consultant. And here?
I'm working on my own learning app.
Great. This is good. This is great. All right, so, okay, but this is a perfect applicable to everyone here, right? But a lot of times, one of the problems that I have, talking about Marty King, and that's the example, but a lot of the thought leaders, they focus a lot on process and finding insights. I'm not talking about finding insights. I'm talking about being obsessed with finding truth. What is actually happening? So I'll tell you a little about that. And then number two, once you find truth, you just blow it up. That's it. It's so easy. Recently, I got this job offer for it's a great gaming company. They're making billions of dollars. And it's, well, they're not making billions of dollars. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And they were like, one of the questions I had is are you better at finding, ideation or problem solving? And I was like, look, if you find the right insight, if you find truth, the problem solving is so easy. Honestly, and even if you mess up on the problem solving, you get 0.5% of halfway there. If you were working on the right thing, you will get it right. Even if the problem solving wasn't fantastic, your work on the right things is the right thing to do. So step one, find truth. Any questions so far? This is all blah, blah, blah. All right, finding truth. Here's a little bit about one of the truths that I found at Duolingo. Truth number one is Duolingo is not a language learning app. Everyone thinks it is, and it's not a language learning app. Even you go talk to people there, even the way I introduced Duolingo, I said it's a language learning app. It is not a language learning app. So let me explain. So I did hundreds of interviews with users when I was there. And one of my favorite questions to ask was to figure out why they're using the product. I would ask them, all right, why are you using Duolingo? And to learn French. Okay, why are you learning French? And they would say things like, oh, maybe I have a trip coming up. I need to get ready, right? Or my sister-in-law married someone, whatever it might be, right? There's a couple dozen reasons why you want to learn a language, right? But then I would ask him, and most people stop there. I'd ask him okay, and let's assume, and I'll ask them, when do you use Duolingo? And they would say things like, when it's 9 o'clock at night, I'm putting my kids to sleep. I pull out the phone and I use Duolingo. So I said, imagine it's 9 o'clock at night, you're putting your kids to sleep, and then you turn on your phone and you find out Duolingo doesn't exist anymore. The app is gone. Just delete it. The company's dead. You can't download anymore. What would you do with that time? Now, if this was a language learning app, what type of answers would you expect? What is it? Download Babbel, right? What else? Yeah, Totally. Anything that is related to language learning. I'll go to Netflix and watch the show in French. I'll buy a book. I'll sign up for a class. I'll download Babbel. I never, in the 5 years of me being Duolingo, I never heard anything like that, ever. Even from the serious learners. What everyone said, they always said like something like this. They were like, I'll probably go to TikTok, to be honest. Or like, I'll probably go back to Candy Crush. And the realization here is that Duolingo is not a language learning app. Duolingo, the true job to be done here is people have 5 to 10 minutes available at a time, and they want to feel productive during those 5 to 10 minutes. And I've always wanted to learn French, right? Language learning is the way they express that need of trying to gain a skill in really anything. But like, I've always wanted to learn French. I want to do something for 5 to 10 minutes. I'm so sick of being TikTok for 15 hours a day. For this 5 to 10 minutes, I want to be productive. Duolingo is the way they express that. So that's incredibly important. This insight changed everything for me, right? This is not a language learning app. People want to feel, not be. Of course they want to be, but they want to feel productive during those 5 to 10 minutes at a time. All right. Truth number 2 is that we were blocked by our own gimmick. Yeah, question.
Was yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they always as he's saying, like, for those online, it makes sense that with those lines why they added like math and stuff like that into the app, and they don't have Android. Yeah, they typically do iOS first. They're like 80% of revenue comes from iOS. So even though 40% of users come from iOS, 80% of it comes from it. It makes sense to prioritize them. Yeah. So we were blocked by our own game mechanics. So the reason why the language learning app, and this is where gamification comes in, and the reason we were blocked in the language learning is because of this screen right here. So the language learning areas, they kept trying to come up with new features to teach better. So they're like, hey, what if we create like stories where people can read and are fun and it helps with reading comprehension? And it's like, fail. What if we do like audio lesson? Fail. Everything they try to do, it would fail. Yeah.
Wait, what do you mean by the stories fail?
It failed until they didn't. So I'll tell you the story of stories. So it was all failing, and then we fixed something to make it work. So the reason why it fails is because of this screen. In this screen, you have one of the most powerful. Tell me, actually, what do you see? What game mechanics do you think you see in this screen? Like, just looking at it, what kind of stands out to you?
Some kind of journey.
Wait, sorry, what's in the back?
Some kind of journey.
Some kind of journey? Okay, I'll go back to that.
Milestone.
Milestone? What milestone? Like the chest thing?
Yeah, like the second piece in there is a little bit,
Yeah, you have a little reward there. You have a chest that you open for like a milestone. What else? What else do you see? Yeah, at the top, right? There's like this gems that is like your currency. You have hearts. You have the street number. Anything else? Just keeps going. How about right here at the start? You can't see this, but there's a progress bar around this. So you have to do a couple lessons to kind of guild that one. The biggest one, the reason we're blocked is for the one in the back, whoever said it, is the path, the journey. We were blocked. So when people would download the Duolingo, we have this called meta game mechanic. And the meta game mechanic is, I want to learn, people say like, I want to learn French down Duolingo. When they see this, they scroll and I was like, it's a lot. And they think, when I get to the bottom, guess what? I will know French. That's it. That's the game mechanic. So what happened is we were stuck. The learning areas were stuck. Every time they created a feature, we have two options. Either we add it to this path or we add it as a different tab, right? If we add it as a different tab, it was useless because nobody wanted to use it because it would distract you from making progress to finish the course, which is your main objective. See how the game mechanic became our worst enemy, right? And if you add it in the tree, if you add it in the path, we didn't really move anything. You can actually put crap in there, and the game mechanic is so strong, you would do it just because you want to finish it. So if it was bad, yeah, it kind of negative affected metrics a little bit, but it never moved anything. So we would never know if the things we were shipping were actually any good. So it was all subjective. And guess what? You can't A/B test learning features because you can't test if something. It's really hard to test if something is there and to teach and it taught better. It's really hard to test teaching better. You can't test it, revenue, DAUs and all stuff, but teaching is really tough. They still can't test it. So every time we got there, it was like the CEO versus the PM. The PM was like, I like the CEO. was like, I hate this. It's like, well, now what? It's like, well, the CEO won, So they could not get anything shipped. So we did had a couple of things I mentioned, like, what do you mean stories fail? Stories was there, but it was failing. When almost no users, most features there were failing because we were blocked by this game mechanic. So how do you fix that? Actually, I'm going to jump it up. I'm curious, how would you fix that? What do you guys think? There's multiple ways. It's not. I'll tell you what we did, but there's tons of ways to fix this. So you want to have any thoughts? Multiple paths. That's tricky though, because you multiple paths, then people are like, "I want to finish the course," and you're like, "What course?" You know. But in the back.
When you say failing, what were the metrics you were looking at to determine that?
So failing is we were not able to prove that the experience was any better for users, because if it's outside of the critical path, nobody would use it. And if it's in a critical path, the critical path is so strong that it could be good or bad, we wouldn't know, right? And here in the front,
I created that.
you would create a Mad Lib?
Yeah, if you're doing reading and you're reading a story, and you want to make the story fun, then pick it out.
But what would you put it?
Where would I put it?
Yeah.
I mean, based on what I know, it seems that they put it at the beginning of each section.
Yeah, now they're putting it there. That's right. Yeah, so that seems like the obvious thing to do, right? It's like, yeah, just put it there. It makes sense, right? Yeah.
You could change what you're trying to actually accomplish, so rather than finishing, it's just participation. So you incentivize them to go explore and just try to do things rather than succeed.
Okay, I think you're up to, that's exactly what we did. And you're up to something there, right? But then the question is like, how do you do that? Like, what incentives do you create and what game mechanics do you create to help, so people feel like, I'm not wasting my time by spending time in this other tab, right? You have a comment right there?
What about like a leaderboard?
A leaderboard? That's exactly what we did. And I'll explain why that was the answer, right?
That's why I ended up in Duolingo. That's 22 years as a Russian interpreter in the military. Guys at work got into Duolingo, they got this contest thing going on.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm gonna blow you guys up. I haven't got to do Russian.
Just that, you know, and the leaderboard is actually the feature that I built, and it's because of that, right? So it's like, dang, we're stuck here. So I jumped like a couple of slides, but that's the right insight, right? It's like, holy crap, do you understand how the mechanics can help you and hurt you, right? And in this case, a lot of people just wouldn't realize that the journey is one of the most powerful game mechanics Duolingo has, and it's really hard to compete against. So what is such a high, strong meta game mechanic that we had to introduce another meta game mechanic, right? The third truth, going back to my slides, is never trust research. I'm just going to say just bluntly, just don't trust research. Like, I remember being at Dropbox and being like, I wanted to get some type of insight, and like, guess what? You can't talk to users. You can't do that. And they had a team of UX researchers that like, they were doing all those things, that they would bring people like once a week on Tuesdays, and you have to submit your question. And like, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, the one thing that PMs should never do is outsource their truth seeking. It's okay to get help. It's okay to get UX research. I'm not saying they're bad. They're phenomenal. It's perfect. You should get involved. And there's a couple of reasons why. Sometimes, like, for example, even at Duolingo was constantly frustrated because I was convinced we were not a language learning app, and everyone disagreed with me. Because I was like, what are you talking about? I talked to them and they're serious learners. And it's like, dude, no, you don't get it. Like, you're going like this deep. You have to go this deep, right? Like, they're stopping somewhere, and just get involved. Don't trust research. One of the examples there is the leaderboards. One of the things that we're always heard is like, do not, for the love of anything, don't do competition. When it comes to language learning, right? And so you create a good habit, what works is collaboration. Competition is proven by some scientific like methods and records, and look at this paper saying it actually hurts. Don't do that. And then we did it and it won, like big time, right? Now, there are some ramifications. There are some negative things from all the gamification. We talked about one before we started about some of these things might be a little too much. It kind of alienates some type of users, but the data is just overwhelmingly strong towards the gamification side of things. So yeah.
You're saying it's not don't do research, don't trust research.
Do your own, like.
Do your own, yeah.
Yeah, and like, look, if someone did research, great. Like, be thoughtful about it, right? Like, this is the thing that I hate about Marty Kagan, right? It's like, there's all these things about like, yeah, you do these brainstorms and you do this one spree. Who cares what the engineer is thinking? Who cares what you're thinking? Who cares what the designer's thinking? And you're doing a brainstorm with 10 people in a room for a week. The stupidest thing you can do, right? Like, yeah, sometimes you need to get the creative juices going and we're kind of stuck and all stuff, but 10 people in a room for a week that is not your user, like, come on, right? Like, do your research. Do your research. It's okay to have brainstorms. It's okay to do the sprint stuff, but just don't get so caught up on the process side of things that you miss the mark, which is find truth. Once you find truth, then the problem solving becomes more obvious. And honestly, if you do like half-baked problem solving, it's still phenomenal, right? So anyways, just do your research. So here's what I meant by research. One of the things that I did is I started talking to people who use specific features. And at the time, Duolingo had this thing called clubs. You remember clubs? It was like a little, basically it was a tab where, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. There was a tab that it was limited to 50 users at any time. And you can create your own club. So you can be like Saratoga or Lehigh Spanish speakers. And then anyone who's Lehigh Spanish speakers can join my club. And there's 50 people there and you can chat with each other and sometimes little prompts that you can answer, stuff like that, right? But there are two problems, right? Once you join, we never kicked you out. And it was limited to 50 users. So can anyone see a problem with that? This is a really tricky question. And it's a bad question because I'm asking you to read my mind, but you're limited to 50 and we never leave you. Okay, yeah, so this wasn't leaderboards, but yeah, you're going to the right place. It's like you go in there and it's the same people. What's the problem here?
When you stop using it, like by yourself.
Totally. So think about this, right? Like what is the 12-month retention for a product like a gaming product or a product like Duolingo? Let's say it's like 10, 15%, 12-month retention. So that means that when you join a club, I'm not good at math. I should have chose 100. 7, I don't know. There's 50 people, 12 months later, only 7 are active. And then 43 are dead. They never participate. It's a cemetery. You go to those clubs and it was just dead. Nobody would participate because it was flooded with churned users, right? So that was a problem. And then I was talking to them and they were like a couple of features. And then I was like, we should kill this. This is stupid. And then there was a few people that start saying this insights start coming. And I believe this is like almost literally the exact quote. Say I changed the name. Like, I hate this club's thing. Like, I hate it. Except for when it's Sunday night and this a-hole, John, he's passing me an XP and I have to go back and he wanted to beat him up, right? Like, he's like, and he's like, he just goes back and does more XP and then the other person does XP. And then like every Sunday night, they're on this little competition thing. And I was like, huh. It's like, they really care. Every time someone talks about this hidden feature within a feature within a feature, they care. And they're like, man, that thing is just so. And I was like, that's the insight, right? So you see how you start combining those three things together in those kind of insight collection? So then once I had that, then it was just blow it up time, right? We have the truth finding. Now we just blow it up. And here was our solution, right? And like I said, there was many solutions to this. I'm not saying it's the only one, but this is what we did, and this one worked really well. So one of the reasons why this one worked, it's kind of the thing of like exploration, right? So the way you solve exploration is introducing a different meta game mechanic that lets people care and you reward them for doing other things. So in this case, the thing that competes with the tree, the course, and the path is XP. At the time we had XP, just nobody cared for it because it's just a hidden number in your profile. Like you just would never really care for it. But all of a sudden XP becomes valuable. So this is a pretty simple feature, right? It's like leaderboards and it's like packed with gamification. This is not even half of what the gamification goes into it. So let me tell you one example of kind of this principles of gamification, right? That work, right? So in leaderboard, some of the things we did is a sense of progress. You always want to do a sense of progress. You're getting better. There's this thing called the zone of proximal development. Have you guys heard of it? So basically what it means is that as you progress in your usage of a tool or whatever, your skill set should be increasing. Think about a game, right? You become better, you get a new sword or whatever. So your skill set increases. And as your skill set becomes better, the difficulty should increase, right? And just this kind of little zone there that if you're getting more skills and the difficulty does not increase, you get bored and then you leave the app. And in the opposite, if you're not increasing on your skill set and your difficulty increases, then it's really hard and you get frustrated and you leave the app. So you gotta keep them in. So this kind of sense of progress, right? So at the top, oh, this is kind of hiding what I have. So progression, we get this thing where like the top 3 get rewarded. The leaderboards is a week-long thing. Top 10 in a league. So you get cohorted with new people. The only way you can get in a league is if you do an activity that week. So if you stop using Duolingo, you don't get cohorted. Nobody would ever see you. It's only if you were active. So 100% of people in this league are active that week. Yeah, question in the back.
Is this among friends or is this global? Like,
this is global. We experimented a lot with the friends, and actually it was truly tricky because at the time there wasn't the friend graph wasn't very well created. So if you just paired it with friends, it would just be a disaster because now I'm going to pair with my mother-in-law who hasn't used Duolingo in 10 years, and it's just over. So started with that, and they're starting experimenting. We have a couple of questions there. Yeah.
My experience as a user, even though we weren't in mobile, our XP was, so every Monday we come in, everyone would put it into teams. What was your XP?
You would do that?
My work group.
Oh, you would put it in. You create your own leaderboard. Yeah.
So we were still doing it. So
yeah. Yeah, there was actually, I would say there's some caveats. For example, there's a lot of usage in schools for Duolingo. And the use case there is pretty different than what I'm telling you right now. Even there, we cohort them in their school. Ignore schools for a second. 99% of the usage is what I'm talking about. And you had other questions there. Yeah, go ahead.
When you say these leagues, you just like randomized cohorts, I'm guessing, just based on the thousands.
Yeah, so he's asking if the randomized. So yeah, so the users that you see here are randomized, and that basically is like we just cohort you based on whenever you did a lesson. So we did a lesson, you got XP. If you do the first lesson of the week, it doesn't matter if it's a Tuesday. If you did a Tuesday lesson, even though some people already started being cohorted on Monday, you get paired with people who did a lesson on Tuesday, and we just fill it up until we get 50, and then we create a different cohort. In this case, the Gold League, right? So basically what happens is that if the top 10 people who get the most XP get promoted to the next league, so it goes from, bronze, silver, gold, all the way to like diamond and emerald and all that crap, right? So you just get promoted. And then if you were at the bottom 10, you get demoted, right? So then you're in this thing where like, you want to keep using it. And the other thing that was really smart, which that sounds like so obvious to say, but we thought about it, like, when should we end this competition, right? And the obvious thing was like, do it on Sunday night at the end of the week, right? It makes a lot of sense, but it makes a ton of sense because most users, well, not most, but a ton of users would stop using the app in the weekends. And if you stop using the app in the weekends, you come back on Monday, you lose your streak, you're screwed, you don't want to use it anymore. So if you can help people go through the weekends of using the product, when you come back on Monday, right, you have an 8-day streak and then you're there. And then at that point, the streak becomes bigger, and then you have a 14-day streak, you really don't want to lose it, then you're using the weekend. So this feature, for example, increased usage by like 25%, but it increased weekend usage by like 60% or something like that, right? Because people are trying to compete on Sundays so they don't get demoted or they get promoted. The other thing about this is that once you have this, then your ability to send very relevant push notifications just goes through the roof, right? Because imagine this, you're like number 10 in the leaderboards, you're like, I'm gonna get promoted, right? So some Sunday morning, and like I'm going to church, and then you get a notification, it's like, hey, Lily just passed you, and now you're 11th, you're out of the promotion zone. You're like, holy crap. So you're like, go in and do it, and then you kick Lily out, and then Lily gets a notification like, Lily, you just got kicked out of number 10. Then Lily comes in and does, and then you're sending this very relevant push notifications that doesn't feel like spam, but you can always turn it off if it's annoying, right? Well, some people are like, it's annoying, I'll turn it off. That's fine. Yeah.
About bots.
Bots, yes. Questions about bots.
My first concern about this speaker and what ultimately is happening was because I think that a lot of basic bot activity.
Okay.
Like people gaming the system just to like get your awards or whatever, that it wasn't like actual use, but it was something of automated usage that gets you first place because people like to that.
Yeah. So the question was, and the comment was that there's a lot of concerns around bots for this online that, you know, if they're getting some unrealistic amount of XP and you're competing with that, it's super stupid, right? So yeah.
How do you account for that in a leaderboard like situation that is like very powerful tool? So like you're always in a game system of a leaderboard at the top.
Yeah. So there's gaming it from like the perspective of like they figure out which gives you more XP, and then there's gaming it of like I created this like snippet of code that gives me. So on the snippet of code things, it was actually fairly easy to detect after the fact. So you have it was very small percent, very tiny amount of people doing that, and typically we just catch it really quickly and then patch it up. What was more surprising to us is the amount of people who were like terribly obsessed with it. Like we're like, it's like this is a bot, and then we're check and we're looking all the log, and we're like, hey, this is not a bot. Like this is crazy. Like, have they eaten today? You know? I'm like, someone check on. And you do have to be careful, right? Because the rewards the incentive you're creating is gonna lead to some behavior. So if you go to I don't know if anyone's using Duolingo, but if you're in the highest league, man, good luck. Like honestly, if you're highest league, this has got to be tough. Like it's brutal out there. And the worst, you know what's crazy? You know what happens when you get to the top league? Nothing. You made it. No, like, I made it. Like, now what? Stay. You know, like, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you can get into it also, but you have the achievement feature as well. And that was fun for me to do. And so, kind of your point about like, there's these crazy bots, or your point about like, just particular success. I figured out, well, you just have to be smarter than the bots, because the bots aren't that smart, they just give you the facts, right?
Yeah.
So I just said, okay, well, like, before I join a league, like the next week, I just wait as long as possible, and then join, like right before midnight or whatever, and then I'm in with all the slackers who aren't doing anything, and then just go in and, you know.
No, he's got a point.
And so that's how I got done.
We actually did see an increase of spike of usage. I believe it was like on, I think it was a Thursday, Friday. It's like after a certain day, we wouldn't cohort it until the next week. And so people figured out I wanted, but the problem with that is if you care about your streak, right? Like,
oh, it was risky.
So what happened? We have this thing called streak freezes, which I have a slide out. We'll get to it. But the streak freeze, you know, people will be like, okay, I want to join later because I want to beat them, and that's exactly right. And so you use streak freeze Monday, streak freeze Tuesday, and then you run out of streak freezes, and you're like, holy crap! And then you're like, what do I do? And you know, you got to be a little creative, but you see a little bit spike of usage of people who are like figuring out that if you get cohorted later in the week, you're with the lazier one, like less intense. Let's say less intense people, right? Who are like wake up in the morning at midnight and already going, you know.
Hey, I have one more question.
Yeah.
On the flip side, did you have to do anything for the losers? I just imagine you can only lose so many times before you're just discouraged and you're out. And I know they have different leagues and stuff like that, but is there any consideration you have to do for you lose too many times in a row? We're going to have to anything along those lines to keep
they are trying. So the question is like, do you do anything for the losers? The losers who keep getting demoted. The people who keep getting demoted. Yeah, but I think that so they're doing it. I believe, and I wasn't there for that anymore. But I believe I saw something like league freeze. Like, that was a rough week for you. You got sick. We're gonna freeze your league. You're not gonna demote. So the stuff like that. But most of it, that's a very small over optimization. I mean, it's not over, but it's a further down the line, right? It's like, yeah, there's some percent of users that are getting hurt in aggressive numbers, and how do you address them? But the wins on that, they got to be pretty small overall. Yeah, in the back.
Do you mind sharing a little bit how you went from the insight to this? Like, bring us in the weeds for a minute. Like, who'd you have to get involved? Time frames, prototypes you made.
Sorry, how do I went from insights?
Like you went from the insight from before, to shipping this.
To shipping it, or to coming up with the insight that like we should build this.
Probably just coming up with that. Yeah.
Okay, so there were two things that happened. One is the head of product. He's more of like he's unbelievable. Jorge Masala, if everyone know him, great guy. He's one of my best friends, and he's very structural thinker. So he was thinking top down. Or we solve all Duolingo. And I'm thinking like, man, this guy loves leaderboards or build leaderboards, right? It's like I'm the dummy version of him, right? And so I think it's like once you come up with that, like the story that I tell you is like, look, we're blocked by our own mechanics. Like we need a way out. We need to come up with a different meta game mechanic that allows for this exploration, right? and then you figure out like, and you give them like the quotes, and like people really care about this super hidden feature, and it's broken, and we can fix it, and like the conversation becomes smoother. So Duolingo has this process where the head of the CEO, Luis Bonan, he's very product minded, but you have like CEOs, for example, I'm guessing like Dave Grohl from Lucid, he's more of a sales CEO, loves sales, great guy, right? Super sharp guy. Luis is product. Product is his thing. He loves product. So the process is we actually had this thing called product review, which I believe like Apple came with it back in the day, but it's if you want to touch anything in the app, you need to get approval from the CEO, head of product, and head of design. Anything. Any change you want to make, those three have to approve it, or you cannot change it. So so we had this thing called one pager where like show up and like, here's what I think we should do. Is a pretty big one. Here's the insights, and then like approve, and then you just go at it and figure it out. And then you go back with like full spec, everything. And there's a couple iterations of that. But once you have the right insights, I think it's not pretty obvious, but it helps to know what to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going a little slow here, but I think it's a good conversation. So yeah, what this helped then is like XP became valuable. And so imagine, for example, stories, which the question was like, wait, story doesn't really fail. What are you talking about? Well, it was failing once we did this. Like the increase of people doing stories increased by like something crazy, like 180%. And it's because people realized that that was an easier way to get XP per minute was easier, right? Or like even cognitive load, like just reading versus like doing a hard lesson, reading, pressing next, right? And then you get 25 XP and you're like, so great, let's do more of that. And it's something with a leaderboard. So like people, you can just control the flow and it just unblocked us. Now, it doesn't work like that, right? You don't have a different tab for stories. So in the path, but that's because we already know stories was a great product. It helped with all metrics. So then put it in the app was just a no-brainer, right? So yeah, XP matters, blah, 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 blah. So this is this stories, you got audio lessons, which that one didn't work, but for different reasons, but at least it helped us know XP can, now people are trying all the stuff that they weren't before. So here's some of the results. So on the left, you have percentage of current users, basically the percentage of the users of a streak greater than 7, right? Greater or equal to 7. So at the time, there were about 30% of total DAUs, excluding the new users, of qualifying DAUs who had a streak greater than 7. And then after leaderboards, you see this big spike. It obviously drops January, right? People lose their streak, but after Christmas break and what stuff. But it increased a ton because of this weekend problem, right? Where now people are using the weekend where they weren't before. And so people now push through that for 7 days, and then they just kind of stay with their streak. So we moved that, which moved this other metric called current user retention rate, which, if you heard me talk about it, current user retention rate is basically a retention rate from, they do it daily, but the way to think about it is like people who were using the app 2 weeks ago, who were also using it last week, and what percentage of them come back this week. That's current user retention rates. So you're basically removing all the new users or resurrected users. You're just looking at your core. And when we moved that one. So you see the current user retention rates increase. So from 65 all the way to past 70. And we had Duolingo as such a big user base that when we move this number, right, then you see this is DAUs. So this is basically when I joined, when it was like declining, and I was like, what the crap? Did truth finding, and they like just blow it up, right? Now, leaderboards is not the only thing we did. We did other things, but this is exactly the type of impact you can have through gamification and looking at the right insights and the right things, right? So any questions on this? This is basically saying like, round of applause. No, go ahead and back.
Any reason it would spike and plateau over and over again?
Oh, this one, the plateau is because there's a little bit of seasonality, and it's a lot, for example, school. So in the summer, people use Duolingo less. So you'd imagine, for example, when it's New Year's, and this is the case with like, when you go to the gym in New Year, like January, like the first week of January, gyms are packed. You go in like September and it's dead, right? So, Duolingo does really well in January, like subscription, new accounts created, people coming back, like, this is the year I'm going to learn German, right? Like, I'm going to do it. And then summer is a little tough. and then it kind of come pick up again. So that way it's kind of plateaus. But if you look at the yearly thing, it's a very step function increases there. It's a good question. So, leaderboards, how are we doing on time? Do you guys want to keep talking? All right, let me just talk about maybe one or two things. Just a quick word on leaderboard and streaks. Streaks is one of the other most powerful things Duolingo has, and I just want to share this. I've done that. I do some consulting for some other companies too, and I always get this thing of like, streaks don't work for us. We tried it, they don't work. And typically, when they don't work, is one of these reasons. Number one is you need to make streaks like front and center. Like there's some other apps that have streaks that is like, yeah, after you do the thing, and we add this thing on the top, and like, it's a lot. No, it's got to be like, boom, yeah, animation, check, nailed it. You're doing great. It's very bold, but you have to do it. Number two is keep it top of mind. Like keep it somewhere that's highly visible where you're like, hey, you know, this is your streak is here, your streak is here, your streak is here. Put a reminder everywhere. Then streak notification. So there's all this kind of funny memes that came really from some of the copy that we had. So for example, if you stop using Duolingo after 7 days, we actually send notifications saying like, hey, this notification don't seem to be working, so we'll stop sending them for now. And it feels, we actually call internally the passive aggressive notification because they're like, just like, ouch, the Duolingo just gave up on me, you know? So they do daily reminders and you tell them ahead of time, you prep them, and then you do this thing called the streak saver notification. This is brilliant. And basically what it is like if it's 10:30 p.m. and you haven't done Duolingo, we send you a notification saying like, you're about to lose your streak. It doesn't matter if you have streak savers or streak freezes. We still send you a notification saying you're going to lose your streak. So everyone's freaking out unless it's like at 11 p.m. It's like, oh my gosh.
So that's why my 13-year-old comes running into the room and says, I need my phone.
Yeah, I need it. I'm going to lose my streak. And like, there's a constant anxiety, right? People live in fear.
Same thing, Daniel. You've ruined bedtime.
I did some, but that one was already there. They did a good job. They do a thing that I didn't add, but goals, like break it down. Just get to a 3-day streak. Just get to a 3-day streak, you know, like that's all you got to do. And then 7, and then 14. And you're like, once at some point, if you have a 1-day streak, who cares? If you have a 5-day streak, like, I can start it next week. If you have like a 30-day streak, man, you don't want to start that over, right? So one of the problems Duolingo has is that if you have a really big streak and you actually lose it, you're very unlikely to come back. Because if you have like a streak of 500 days and you lose it, you're like, oh, I'm not doing that again, right? Like 500 days starting from scratch, that sucks. So it's really tough. But the other one is the streak freeze, right? Like sometimes you're like, everyone's going to lose using the product at any given point. So everyone's going to lose a day or two or whatever. But you have to help them keep it and correct it. They also have streak repair. So like we give you 2 streak freezes. We have something like a weekend streak freeze. And if you lose it, we still try to repair it. Like we try so hard to help you keep it. And so this is one of the clients that I had, and you can see, so basically the line here is a user that had a streak greater than like 5 or something like that. And there's each line is one user, and to the y-axis is the streak number. So it's like flat. And then implemented these things, and then this is the streaks that they're seeing in their users, right? It's like each line is limited to the top 50 or whatever. But you can see how streaks kicked in after those changes, right? So there's ways to kind of pull that off. You just gotta be smart about the streaks and how you're gonna do it. But there's some mechanics around streaks that you can do. Anyways, okay, and then that's it I have for gamification. But I did want to have something that I want to share now that I have this platform. Is I think the product management industry is just blasted with just crap content. Like it's so bad. And part of the reason is I remember, and I actually came to one of these events a while back, and I heard this product leader, which is a phenomenal leader. And he said something like, look, if you're a PM, an engineer doesn't want to do what you want to do, as a PM, you should never say, well, dude, I'm the PM and we're doing it. I get on board. Like, you should never do that. Don't be authoritarian, right? Like, go get the data, do your homework, and then come back and show that data and then make the decision. I think that's bullcrap. Now, I'm not saying that piece of feedback is bad and that idea is bad. I don't think PM should be authoritarian by any means. But the tricky part about being a PM, and it's somewhat similar to being a founder, is that the way you act and the things you do highly depend on the situation, right? So for example, I was at the end, like last year, maybe Duolingo, they put me on this product that was like 50,000 MAUs in decline. And I had this designer who I'm going to call John. And is that his name? No, that's not his name. And it was like, John wasn't performing. And my concern was like, I don't even know if he was working. I was like, what do you do all day, man? Like, we're all dying here and we need those designs and you're not doing anything, right? And so then I chatted with him several times and like nothing, like I never saw anything for weeks. I was like, this is crazy. Like, are you working on anything? And like, it's like, yeah, you never want to show me anything. I'm like, I don't think this guy is legit. He's in the office. He was chatting. I don't know what he's doing. Escalated to the manager. I need your help. Nothing. Escalated to her manager. Nothing. Escalated to the VP of design. Nothing. I escalated to the CEO. He's like, dude, you got to deal with it. And I'm like, F this, right? Like my team won't exist in a year if we keep working at this. So how do you piss off a designer? How do you do that?
Do your own design.
So that's exactly what I did. Right? But do you see the insight though here? It's not like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. No, the insight is not you shouldn't do your own designs. The insight is if you do the designs, you're going to get the designer mad. That's the truth, right? The question is, do you want to make the designer mad or not? Right? So in my situation, I was in a failing team that was in a decline. And I was like, I got to set the pace. And if this guy's not getting on board, he needs to get out. Right. And he didn't report to me, so I couldn't get him fired. Nobody cared about my product. So then I was like, I got to design. And I chatted with him. I was like, look, we're drowning. We're getting killed. And I can't wait for you. So I'm going to do it. And I'm really sorry. This sucks, but I got to do it. And I'm not even that good of a designer. And you know what I did? I was like, can you make sure that the padding is correct? He left the team in 2 weeks. So he went to a different team, and guess what? We flipped that team from 50,000 declining MAUs to 1.5 million MAUs in a matter of less than a year, right? But it's the tone that you're setting, right? Is it peacetime or is it wartime, right? And so a lot of the feedback is just BS, right? It's not like you should not tell the engineer get on board, or that you should tell the engineer I'm going to get this data. Is know that if you do that, there's some consequence. What's going to happen, and are you going to choose to do that or not? Right? So just be smart about even the feedback that I just gave you. Maybe this feedback that I'm giving you is trash. We'll never know. But just be smart about it and see how it applies to your situation in that given time and use the tools you have. We have a question.
I just have a question for the dev. Will that work if I try to write my own code?
Yes. They probably wouldn't accept your pull request. They're like, this guy, you know. So you couldn't even get in. Think like everyone has access. The engineers are a little protected there, right? But that's all I have. Any questions? Any comments? Anything you want to chat about? Let's go right here. Actually, hold on a second. Okay, there's a question there, but let's go to yours first.
Talking about like theory, theory. Well, like I was some of the best before of like if I had a high dropout rate.
Yeah, I think everything that I mentioned is to a certain level applicable even for B2B or for more serious situations. You just have to tone it according to your user base, right? Like you're not going to put a little character like, hey, you know, fill up this cancer form, like, woo, you know, like you also have to be very careful. But in essence, like I really think a lot of gamification and software is how do you make it so you align the incentives. Right, you have incentives, you align them with what you want them to do. And so a lot of it can very much be applied, right? But even the color scheme and the type of animations you have might be different. But yeah, like one of the things I don't like is there's sometimes you're like trying to do something and they're like the stupid achievements for like, I don't know. You gotta know like this doesn't really apply. You just don't do achievements for like the funeral home, right? And I don't know, stuff like that, right? Like you gotta be very careful, but you can definitely apply a lot of these principles there. We had another question here.
So how do you use that?
Well, I don't know what I'm doing right now, I'll be honest with you. I don't work at Duolingo anymore. I left a couple months ago. So
Where you're at now, I'm taking a look at gamification there and how you use it there.
Well, I really don't know what I'm doing with my life right now. So if you have any tips, let me know. I don't know. I'm about to cry right now. Thanks to you. Like you said, yes, I am. No, I'm not sad. Well, I think it just depends on the industry, right? Like, what do you work on? Huh?
Physical products.
Physical products. Yeah, it's a little tricky there. You know, I mean, if it's, yeah.
Or watching that it's this is all about how to do things outside of the app.
Why would you want that?
This app,
Yeah. So yes, it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky when the question is, can you do gamification when there are things that you want to do outside of the app? The reason why it's tricky because it's really easy to cheat, right? So if it's, for example, one of the clients that I had was a fitness app, right? And they want to do a leaderboard, and I was like, oh, it's a little tricky, right? Because it's all user input, right? Whereas like I exercise and this was my lift, you literally just have to type it. So if you just say, we're going to create a leaderboard, what you're incentivizing is cheating and lying. That's what you're incentivizing. So in this case, I was like, don't do leaderboards. Don't do that. So I've done that. Some of that, you just got to be careful with what, just try to think like, if you had this experience and you're the user, how will you behave? And if your answer is like, oh, this whatever, then don't do that, right? Let me answer this first. It says, great presentation, Daniel, you're amazing. Thank you. That's the first question. Just went to the Duolingo splash page. It says, the free, fun, and effective way to learn a language. So it's at least marketed that way. But I get the point. That feeling of quick productivity is real. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, in essence, like when you go to do your marketing, right? You don't say Duolingo is like, hey, use those 5 minutes of waste time into feeling productive. You still pitch language learning because that's the way you express it, understand it. But you knowing that people are trying to do is feeling productive and like it changes how you behave. Let me just answer this. Can you share some of your approaches for find truth? So there's a lot of approaches for truth finding. The one thing I would say is don't make talk to users your go-to always. Like that's another trash like piece of feedback PMs get all the time. It's like, how many customers you talk to this week? If you're not talking to them, that's BS, because there's better ways to get insights sometimes from how people behave and what people are thinking. If you talk to me right now and say like, Daniel, I noticed that you went to our landing page a week ago. Can I chat with you for 20 minutes? I was like, man, I don't remember. Was it me? Did I even go there? Was it my son? Like, I don't know, man. What do you want me to say? Like, it's so out of context. I don't know. What it is. And user interviews are extremely useful. And I did hundreds of them when I was there, but it's a spoon. Sometimes you need to use a fork, right? Like, just be smart about how you're getting data, right? If you look at like customer feedback forums, if you look at the data, I always look at the app reviews, just like you can see. Sometimes actually the other part I really disagree with is when people say like, dude, you're not the user. You're not the user. Yes, guess what? I was the user of Duolingo and that was my key. The average success rate of A/B tests at Duolingo was something like 35 and 30s or 40%. Mine was a little over 90% success rate in my A/B test, because every time I was using the product so much that I was like, this sucks. And then I look at data, I was like, oh yeah, this sucks. We should fix it. And it was so much easier. And it really, that was the reason why I excel so much at Duolingo, is because I became the user. So I get it. Sometimes you can't do that and you got to be very careful, but that's another one that I think there is a time and place for you being the user. So those are some examples there. We got 2 more questions there.
Yeah. I just wanted to add on to what you're saying, like just the data quality. That's quality, right?
Yeah.
If you go to my house, like go through my kids saying,
Right, exactly.
or whatever, you know, so
Yeah.
like if that's them,
For us, the game,
or whatever, you know, both guys are guys. Well, are they? I don't know. If you have guys you're playing against, are you acting? No, I'm not acting. So like, nobody's gonna say the truth.
Yeah.
In that situation, but you know, on the back end, like
Yeah.
your statistics and everything,
Totally.
that is much more valuable than what's the user.
Yeah.
What's the user.
And at times, right, it really depends on the insight that you're trying to collect, right? I do think there's a time and place for user interviews. I'm not a hater of them. I just think that we say, hey, you want to talk to you. If you're not actually talking to the user and sitting down with them, you're useless. That's the lie. I do think there's a time and place for it, but the problem is when you're trying to collect all answers from talking to users, that's a mistake, right? You had a question, a
Yeah, I have a
comment?
question. So you mentioned Gamification is a field productive. You mentioned the company is to help you learn language. So I guess my question is, did you care, or maybe should you care, whether or not the app is actually producing proficiency in language learning? And how did you think about measuring success in those terms? Because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So like the question for us online is basically like, hey, did we care at all about actually delivering on the promise of teaching a language, right? So we did care a lot. So in fact, if you look at the product teams that I shared, these are kind of the areas, the product areas, and oh my gosh. Okay, this one, the ones in green, right? If you look at how many teams are in the green versus how many teams are in the rest of the company, the green ones are all focused on learning. They don't need to move DAUs. They don't need to move retention. They don't need to make money. The only thing they need to do is teach better. And that's over half, I believe, half of all product teams. At least at the time I was there, 60% or so of all efforts were spent on teaching better. So just because the job to be done was that doesn't mean that, look, we're not going to create a scam. So one of the things that we did actually is we run this efficacy studies where we sample users and we actually had a third party run this test. They sample our users, they had to take a third party test, and they compare with people who went to college and studied a language for 2 years. And it turns out if you're halfway through the course, it equals to you studying 2 years in college. You get the same test results. So anyways, so we did care a lot about it, and there's a mismatch, but I think internally, if you understand that people want to feel productive, right? Like it changes a little bit of things that how you decide to teach the language, right? Because the thing about it was like, and research will always tells this, and UX researchers as well, and data scientists and language scientists, and be like, what about the serious learners, right? Like this won't help the serious learners. And we just found that that wasn't completely accurate, right? Because even the serious learners, they want to do something productive for 5 to 10 minutes, right? So good question. And then the last one, maybe I think we have 5 more minutes, but do you have another question there? Yeah.
I was curious on your mission for True, that kind of in some ways starts out a solo mission, or do you kind of have finding allies as a group mission? How does that work?
Oh, so the question of is the truth, finding truth like a solo mission versus a group mission. So I see it mostly like a PM mission, so like an org. But I do think that everyone should be obsessed with finding truth, like UX researchers, for example, right? Like they should be obsessed with truth finding, right? But I think ultimately, look, if an experiment doesn't go well, like Duolingo, everything was an experiment, right? But if something doesn't go well, nobody's going to look at the designer and be like, the heck, dude? Like, come on, man, you really built that? Right? Everyone's going to look at the PM. It's like, dude, you shipped that crap? Like, what's wrong with you, you know? So you really have to own it because you are held accountable for it. And so use the team, use your engineers, right? Engineers have great insights for like, dude, I'm finding a lot of issues here. We should look into it, right? And it's like, yeah, dude, listen to them, but I think the problem with PMs are often just they just trust a little too much. They need to just look a little deeper sometimes.
It doesn't matter. You're dealing with them different places. You know, the customer success, sales, everyone else is also important.
Yeah.
So if you don't know truth, if you know about truth, then it's so like, and if you're doing it from sales and customer success, engineering, and marketing, and you bring it all together, that's not an easy thing to do.
It's not easy, but ultimately it's your job. Yeah, it's sort of.
But you're right, it is your job.
But
ultimately, you're the one getting it.
Yeah. But I think that one thing I have to clarify is like, at least for me, like I much prefer, it's not like, for example, customer support is telling me that this is a problem. It's like, I actually go and read all the customer support tickets and I categorize them. And I said, this is what they're saying. And here's why. And it's like, oh my gosh, we should fix X, right? And then I chat with them and like, what do you think? And I like, but maybe I'm just a little too I have trust issues, maybe, I don't know. But I found that sometimes the problem is like, people don't go deep enough to really understand a problem. So because the customer support is not responsible for you shipping a good product. They're just responsible for giving a good customer support experience. So they can give you insights, but ultimately it's your responsibility to ship a good product. So you can don't you know.
And sales is always going to tell you everyone wants this.
Yeah, and you know what, sales, and actually, I do think sales. I would say they're a little bit better in general at giving good insights, but I think the tricky part with sales is more of like then it becomes a prioritization issue. Like they might be right, but now you're like, okay, well, how do I do this one with this, and then there's other 50 features.
Yeah, you like customize it for everyone.
Yeah, and sometimes I think the problem too is that sometimes we're just too stuck of like we don't want to. We're afraid of making a decision because there's 50 and we don't know which one's the best. Just pick one, move on. Like sometimes it's better to do something than just stay still than just analysis paralysis, right? But yeah, anyways. Any other questions or comments? We're at time. Okay, well, there's 2 more in the chat. Let me see. Smiley face. Oh, favorite kid. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.